I've come to you before to discuss the food crisis. I just wanted to touch base with you on it again. My Patreon and my YouTube memberships pages, you guys do get separate content, so the same content does not go on both platforms. However, this will be a video that you will see on both platforms. So for those of you who are both members of Patreon and my YouTube memberships, this will be a video that you will see on both platforms because it's just important and it's ridiculous for me to give it to one group of people and not the other. So I want to have a serious conversation about the food shortage because I think with the rioting and the hoopla around Trump and all of this extra stuff, we forget that there is still a food crisis. So first of all, let's keep in mind that the global food supply chain is linked. So a food crisis in multiple countries is a food crisis for us all, but there's also a very real food crisis here still going on in the United States. And I want to talk about the foods that you should try to buy because they are the ones that are going to be the most immediately unavailable when it all starts to hit the fan here in the United States. And we're at the beginning stages of that. So this is very different from the food shortages that we experienced at the beginning when the coronavirus started. So you will notice there was a run on the stores which caused food shortages and a block in the supply chain. But if you look back at my videos from that period of time, prior to these food shortages starting, my concern was not the run on the stores. My concern was the shoveling of the food back into the ground, the killing of the livestock, the inability to harvest the crops, right? These things were my concerns because a run on the store is one thing, inability to produce food and countries shutting down their exports is a whole different thing. So right now there is a food crisis that is global. It is reaching everywhere from India into Africa, South America, and the Middle East. It is expansive. We have China that has experienced massive flooding that is affecting their ability to produce and harvest. So we have things that are going on globally on virtually every single continent with regard to food shortages. And of course, we had our issues here in the United States where we plowed food back into the ground, where we were dumping milk, where we were killing chickens, killing cattle. Just a few months ago, right? Just 3-4 months ago, we were doing this. And you can't rectify those situations very quickly. So when we talk about acute hunger, we mean actual starvation, right? So if we have around 300 million people experiencing actual starvation, and they're going to see this starting the beginning of the year, or the end of the year, we have to understand that there are people who are experiencing other types of starvation. Now, and that means that they are going hungry. They're not eating healthy meals every day or possibly eating one meal a day or not eating any meals a day. And this is not by choice. This is out of necessity. Something else I want to tie into this is the coin shortage. Now, I thought about doing a separate video on the coin shortage, and I really hope you guys listen to this video all the way through because I'll very simply say this. The coin shortage in the US is linked to the food shortage. So one thing we have to understand is that globally, because there is a shortage of hard currency from tourism, because people aren't able to travel freely as they used to be, that's causing a shortage of physical currency on the whole. So our leaders lied to us. You had Fauci out there saying, if you want to wear a mask, if it makes you feel better, I guess you could do it, but you don't really have to, right? You had him out there doing that whole song and dance. But then, all of a sudden they want us all to wear masks, and the type of mask you wear just doesn't even matter anymore. It doesn't need to filter virus particulates. It's just a power thing, you know. They said there was no food shortage, and then all of a sudden, when it really got bad, they were like, oh, okay, we're going to ration everything, right? So we clearly can't depend on the government for honest information. And along those lines, the U.S. Mint is claiming, oh, you know, even though the U.S. Mint is almost completely automated, like most of the coinage process doesn't require people. They're saying, oh, because of coronavirus, we've had to cut our staff, which means we cannot produce coin. Well, it's not just that they're not producing coin, they want your coin. And I strongly urge against this. Number one, if you have any 2020 coinage, I would keep it. If you have any coinage that is minted 2020, those coins will be worth money. I would just keep them, whether they are silver or copper coin, I would keep those because the 2020 press is very, very small with its output, and so those coins will be worth money. Talking outside of 2020 coinage, so I had to do a bit of an edit because the composition of coinage changes all the time. At the end of the day, our coins have a large amount of copper in them. And one of the reasons they want to retrieve these coins is because, for example, in the case of the penny, it actually costs almost 2 pennies to produce a penny. And so when we look at the coins, there are precious metals in the coins, which is why they want them. Remember, precious metals or semi-precious metals, in this case of copper, do have value. So I would say hold on to your coins, because if you don't have gold in mass, if you don't have precious metals, little do you know your coins do contain semi-precious metals and will be valuable for trade should the US dollar become defunct. Remember, paper money has no value, but our coins do carry some level of value, which is why they're trying to collect them because they have value, which is why you need to hold on to them. I think that's just essential to say. You can check out this chart and see, you know, things like a penny are simply copper plated to keep production costs down, but then that copper variation in each coin, it varies by the coin, and that's something you really need to keep in mind when you're thinking about turning your coins into Coinstar and things like that in such an unstable economic climate. You need to be thinking about the value of the coins that they will have based on the metals contained in them, and trade value if the US dollar becomes worth nothing. Paper money itself won't be worth anything, but coins and paper money are not the same thing because metals are used to make coins. And although nickel, which is a very cheap metal, is part of coin production, a huge part of it is copper. Now, these 2016 compositions may vary from the 2020 compositions, but they're not going to vary that much. At the end of the day, a semi-precious metal is a semi-precious metal and is going to be valuable for trade if the dollar, the paper dollar, the US dollar becomes problematic. The coins themselves will be valuable. You know, coins that are older than the 80s have even more value because the concentration of precious metals in them is even higher. It used to be that our coins met the gold standard, right? Not just they were backed by gold, but that our coinage itself was made fully of precious metals. So just keep that history in mind when they're asking you to turn in your coins or to not take coin change. No, we need our coins, especially if there is economic collapse or a downfall of the paper dollar. When we talk food shortages, when we talk hard currency shortages, what we're looking at is what are tradable assets, right? What are things I can barter with, trade with, use for currency in the event that the economy seriously falters. But don't think that the shortage of hard currency and this move to not utilize hard currency is not linked to the food shortage. Now, we see places, just to travel down that road, we see places like Chick-fil-A and Taco Bell who will literally give you food vouchers in exchange for rolled coin. They want to get their hands on the coins too. Banks are now overwhelmingly providing hard coinage to businesses or individuals, and so businesses are trying to collect them as well. But we see these moves being made. I'm sure you've seen the signs in your neighborhood, in your local stores, where they are wanting exact change, or they're wanting you to use a card, or they're wanting to put change onto a card. They're not wanting to give you coinage. This is tied to the food shortage and this hard currency shortage that is happening because of this man-made economic crisis that is looming over the entire globe. So when we talk about, what does this look like, right? What does it look like for the United States? And we know that globally there are food issues. Are we having them in the United States? Well, absolutely. We have pantries. Milwaukee has a pantry where they literally purchased a cow, a slaughtered cow, whole, so that they could feed people who were coming to their pantry, and they still don't have enough food. They're still well out of food. Places cannot afford to donate what they don't have. Also, we have to recognize that when we look at who we consider to be in poverty, hunger and poverty are not tied. You have a lot of people with incomes somewhere between $55,000 and $75,000 who still go hungry because they have a plethora of bills, car notes, house notes, childcare, all of these bills that they pay, which makes their income not go as far. If you don't live in an area where the cost of living is very low, $55,000 to $75,000 is not a lot of money. $100,000 is not a lot of money to have an entire family. And so when we think about things from that perspective, what we recognize is that indeed there are people who are going hungry that don't fall in the realm of those, 350 to 400 million American, 350 to 400,000, 100,000 Americans that are considered to be below the poverty line, right? So, and also keep in mind, poverty statistics are only measured annually, whereas people have to eat every single day, right? So a person can go hungry and still not be covered in the poverty statistics. So we're seeing the pantries running dry because it's not just people in poverty who are having to use these pantries. It's simply not. With that said, what are the foods that we should be looking at? Well, always the staples. As I've said, we're looking at beans. We're definitely looking at grains because 70% of our grain stores, if you remember my video on the food shortages, 70% of our grain stores are sold to other countries already. We sell them before we harvest them. So I would be looking at 25-pound sacks of flour if you have a Walmart in your area. Now is not the time to be bougie with flour, you guys. Just for, somewhere between $5 and $7, you can grab a 25-pound sack of flour. Grab several of them, right? Grab 40, 50, $100 worth of flour if you can. If it's $5 for 25-pound sack, then we know that for $20 you can get 100 pounds of flour, right? I personally don't use white sugar. So I've been a little bit uppity about the sugar that I would have in my house, although I do have stores of it, but I'm going to be doubling down on getting just pure white sugar. I'll probably get that from Walmart. Really inexpensive. I'm not sure what they're selling it there for, but they also sell 25-pound sacks. That sugar is not necessarily going to be for me to use, but it will be great for bartering, and it will be great for use if I must, right? If I can come across fruit for me to do preserves, things like that. Beans, obviously, lentils, things of that nature are going to be precious. I would say nuts, and I would keep my nuts in like not just, shoveling them in my mouth, but I would actually save them because they're excellent sources of fat and protein. Of course, we're also going to be looking at things like rice, grabbing large bags of rice. 20-pound, I think rice is normally sold by the 20-pound bag. 20-pound bags of rice, I would definitely grab that. And then we go to what you're really going to want to stock up on as quickly as possible, which are canned foods. So there is a canned food shortage because we don't have the ability to produce the cans. Aluminum is starting to be worth a great deal of money as well. So if you need your aluminum foil, I would grab it now. Aluminum is a precious metal. It's why we don't use tin foil anymore. We use aluminum foil, but it is, whether you realize it or not, a semi-precious metal. So I would stock up on that. That will have value to it moving forward. In that same vein of thinking, we're not able to produce the cans that are needed to can food. So we have a shortage of the food that goes in the cans. We also have the inability to produce the cans. So this is where, if you're thinking about cured meats, such as kippers, such as tuna, salmon, chicken, all of those cured meats, all of those canned vegetables, those things, I would grab those now while the food supply chain is somewhat consistent, because that is not going to last. And like I said, I wasn't wrong before when I came to you guys. If some of you might remember, before everything hit the fan with the coronavirus, I was talking this rhetoric about how to protect yourself from the virus and also what food you needed to keep in your house because of impending food shortages. And it wasn't 2 weeks out from my conversations here on YouTube that there literally were runs on the stores. Now, I could be wrong again, right? I could be totally wrong, but I could be right again, right? And I would just encourage you guys, this is so important, to be prepared for this. I know, again, with the distractions of the upcoming election and with the rioting and with the protesting, with everything that's going on, it is easy to lose sight of these things, but you don't want to be caught out. If you can possibly manage it, to get as much in your house as possible. And if you are wondering where you can get these foods inexpensively, cheaply, always feel free to contact me. I know it's easier for my patrons to contact me about where to acquire things than it is for the membership page on YouTube. I know my members on YouTube, there's not really a way for you to reach out to me personally, but I will be happy to tell you where you can acquire these things, where we've been acquiring to stock up on these foods. And I would just encourage you to try to keep your hands off of them. Remember, this has to be food that you're not actively eating, but that you're saving. And I just would call back to those of you who were present when I was telling you to stock up before, and seeing how that ended up being necessary, and that run was happening on our stores, and how those shortages were starting and how the food supply chains were interrupted. And I want to let you know that in 4 months that has not resolved itself. Just because nobody's talking about it doesn't mean that the problem has gone away. Also, I would encourage you guys, vinegar, right? Salt, things like that are going to be immensely valuable. Get your hands on them now. 1-gallon jugs of vinegar, oil, right? You can do a lot with oil, water, and flour. You can do a lot with those things. If you happen to come by some fresh food when the shortages get worse, it would be really great to have vinegar and sugar so that you can preserve or pickle some items, preserve them in some way. So these are all things that we should be thinking about. These are also both tradable commodities, right? If you have an excess of sugar, an excess of salt, an excess of flour, then you can always barter if worse comes to worse. We don't want to end up like so many people around the globe are now, where we're literally starving. because there are so many people who are starving as a result of these man-made crises, these man-made food crises around the globe for coronavirus. While we're all agreeing to stay sheltered in place and we're all agreeing to this authoritarian rule of our governments, what we don't recognize is it's creating a man-made crisis, man-made famines. And it's unfortunate, but it's looming. And as we approach the winter months, it's going to become more evident. So I just really encourage you guys to take heed to this. Like I said, this will be both on my Patreon and my memberships page. I try not to have you guys share content, but this is one of those situations where I feel like this is such an important message that it's really essential that I talk to you. I hope you guys do take me seriously. Like I said, those of you who heard me talking about it the first time around know that I was right the first time around. I hope that you'll have equal faith in me this time around and just simply prepare, right? Prepare yourself. Prepare yourself while everyone is not trying to prepare. That's the same thing I said last time. I said, stock up before everybody catches wind of this, and then you're not able to get the things that you need. That's what happened at the beginning of this pandemic, right? Is that if you weren't prepared ahead of time, there was a run on the stores and it was very difficult for you. And I might add to that cleaning supplies and things like that. Those are still really hard to get a hold of. So where you can, I would try to stock up on those things. It's going to be essential. And I just want as many of us to be able to weather this upcoming storm for as long as possible. Like, this is no guarantee that you won't go hungry, but it can surely prolong your desperation when and if it comes to that, right? And again, worst case scenario, I'm 100% wrong and you just have some extra food in your house that you can share with your family, or that will prevent you from having to buy things. If I'm just totally nuts and totally wrong, but I advise you to look into this a little bit deeper, and you'll see that there is a very real crisis afoot, and it would behoove us to look ahead and prepare for that versus not. All right, I'll talk to you guys later.